Hello everyone, I'm Mango Talk. I play around with language sometimes. This is my submission to Angmashua's fourth cursed Conlang Circus. If you don't know what that is, I suggest checking out the first one, which took place in 2022. I'll link it here. The language is called Kapsa, which literally means my language. It is an oligosynthetic language built up from 9 core concepts, 7 of which are used as cases. You'll see later that verbs are pretty weird, in that they aren't exactly lexemes as much as they emerge from the complex interactions between cases. As a bit of an afterthought, I designed a writing system inspired by Kim et al.'s 2025 paper on graphemic features in various writing systems. I'll link that too. Alright then, let's start with the basic units of sound that we'll be working with. In theory, there are 9 phonemes indicated with uppercase letters. They are m, n, p, t, k, s, y, r, w. I use them to order my lexicon and to refer to my basic building blocks of meaning throughout the grammar. I won't use them for transcription though. What I'll actually use are the 3-ish allophones each phoneme has. I have them in the IPA here, and when it differs, I have the romanization in angle quotes. The distribution of these allophones is governed by this language's phonotactics. Firstly, by their position within a word, and secondly, by their position relative to other phonemes. So, words. As words can be compounded, I'll talk about the units of compounding, lexemes, first. A lexeme is built up of one or more CV elements, of which the vowel must be the same, followed by an optional final consonant or vowel chain. Within any word, the first consonant is glottalized, as you might have noticed from Kapsa, the language's name. Some example words are tsa, eye, tak, body, kanas, stick, and more complicated, kurdirtre, which means end of rebirth. We'll get to the more complicated case stacking later. Just for clarity's sake, let's look at which allophones are consonants and which are vowels for the purposes of word assembly. These are the consonants. Most have only 2 allophones, one glottalized, one not. Nasals are voice stops preceding both vocalic allophones of r. And these are the vowels. You'll note that the nasals have only consonantal allophones. This was just a decision I made when I was playing around with pronunciation. I wanted syllabic consonants, but I didn't want syllabic nasals, so I left them out. S and R lend add into H and L to avoid certain ambiguities. Essentially, I wanted patterns like CVC and CVV to be distinguished. So here are the rules for that. I wanted words like sis and r to stay possible, which is why these contexts are a bit more specific than might seem necessary. The first rule excludes something like sse. It is mainly for perceptual reasons. The second rule clears up possible ambiguities around word structure. Essentially, it clarifies whether r or s are consonants or vowels in this specific context. The final rule is again for perceptual reasons. I didn't want to use length to distinguish this from this. The examples: source, at the place, or por cá, look at it. The dorsal continuants y and w are strictly non-syllabic when they are consonants, which makes something like gsy hard to pronounce with a coda consonant. I resolved that by obligatorily filling the vowel slot following phonemic coronal dorsal continuant sequences. Y and W are not strictly syllabic in vowel chains. However, this mustn't introduce ambiguities. This means that whenever they could fit into a consonant slot due to word structure, they must be syllabic. Thus, there is the distinction between kai and kai, and even a distinction between rather rare katawae and katawae. They can, however, still be non-syllabic in a word like tikya. Alright, you've surely noticed the glyphs preceding my italicized romanizations. Let's look into them. There are 16 glyphs described by these 4 core features. Glyphs containing a straight vertical line are shown in alternating columns. Glyphs that encircle a space are shown in the right half. Crossings where extending all relevant lines yields an X crossing are the feature for the alternating rows. Finally, a so-called L-join is where 2 elements are joined together at an angle. I made sure not to have any rotational or mirrored copies of glyphs in the script, as I know that those are hard to distinguish. The E-like and B-like glyphs are different shapes for just that reason. The cells of this table indicate what phoneme each glyph belongs to, like so. As you might see, the left half is reserved for voiceless phonemes and the right half is all voiced phonemes. These phonemes, however, aren't what is actually typed with the font I made. That would be this table. As you can see, vowels and nucleus-only allophones are found in odd columns. Let's see why that is. Consonantal or onset graphemes have a straight vertical line in them. M is an outlier because I picked about half the sounds based on similarity to the Latin script. T was picked because of the capital T glyph. P was picked because of the capital F glyph. W or U was picked because of the capital O glyph. Y or E was picked because of the lowercase a glyph. Finally, I wanted A to be the most basic character, as it is the least marked vowel in this language. The rest of the continuants were basically picked because of vibes. This includes M and N. Lexemes are bracketed by this lying bracket. I create it by capitalizing initial segments, and I close it by adding a space or non-alphabetic character. This specific bracket is created by an underscore. As word internal vowels repeat, I only indicate the first word internal vowel. The word final vowel complex is always indicated in writing. So, gayas, which means sticks or bones, and gayasai, and the stick. I'll include these two tables in all following slides, so don't worry about remembering all this. So I've hinted at lexemes. In order to get to them, we'll have to look at what makes this language oligosynthetic. These are the 9 roots. Each one has a corresponding phoneme. This technically means that this language doesn't have phonemes in the strictest sense, as phonemes are typically defined as meaningless units that distinguish meaning. Think of how cat and bat are different words, while k and b don't mean anything on their own. I've listed each root with their corresponding basic lexeme to show how I derived word semantics from case semantics. For the non-nasals, I was inspired by the oldest form of the Proto-European case system. For the first case, it makes sense to look at 2 grammatical oddities that English has. The first is that you can refer to instruments and commutatives with the same preposition with. I cut it with a knife, and I went with Sarah. The second is that both the verbal agentive nouns and the verbal instrumental nouns are formed with the ending "er", the teacher and the rice cooker. I used the comitative version of this case, similarly to Proto-European que, as an enclitic conjunction meaning and. The accusative is linked to third person because in sentences like I saw X, kapsa has X be in the accusative. Third person referents are typically being talked about or perceived rather than being addressed. The vocative is paired with the imperative. The imperative is not technically a case, but here it behaves like one. The imperative would typically be paired with the second person lexeme and the ergative, meaning I want that you do X. Then we have the genitive. Not much to say there, except that I haven't decided yet what its basic lexeme should mean, and have thus left that space blank. The additive dative is merged on the model of the English preposition to. I didn't do all these merges because of English, it's just that these examples make the most sense right now. The locative experiential requires some explanation. Essentially, if something happens near me, I am pretty likely to notice it, while if it's far away from me, I'm less likely to see, hear, or otherwise perceive it. This experience of function of the root is also the reason that it is associated with the first person. Finally, we have the ablative. Its association with the past is that when I am moving away from something, me being near that something lies in my past. Conversely, the additive dative and the future. As should be pretty obvious, I chose the additive dative and the ablative to have similar but opposed phonemes. As a nod to Proto-European, the late Proto-European strong cases have stop phonemes here. Finally, I had n be negation pretty early on, and added m for magnitude later during the translation exercise. So, how do we use these roots to form utterances? Firstly, we can add roots together into root complexes. These are built up from left to right, with each successive root specifying the entire complex before it. From the patient-like quality of the accusative comes its object meaning. An object of allative movement, or movement towards something, is thus an arrow, whether physical or visual. Locations are typically pretty static, and thus a static arrow is a line, something that no longer indicates movement. Again, this can be physical or visual, and thus means both stick and line. Next, we have compounds. Here we have a noun-adjective relationship between entire lexemes, rather than root complexes and roots. Dak means water, so kayasnak means something like fluid stick, which I interpret as a rope or a curvy line. An animal that is ropey is a snake, and thus takayasnak is my word for serpent. Finally, we have genitival phrases. These can help clarify the context under which a word is to be interpreted. When context allows it, the genitival bit is left out. Tak means body, or literally living object. Most prominent bones are stick-shaped, and thus the stick of the body is a bone. I mostly leave out the body part in my translation, as I believe it is clear from context that I mean bones when eating is involved. As you can see from these examples, glottalization happens only at the beginning of compounds, but in both elements of genitival phrases. Plurality is encoded by reduplication. So, katao katao means teeth, kayasnak means ropes, and kayas turk means bones. As can be seen from these examples, reduplication targets root complexes and compounds, but splits genitival phrases apart. Reduplication is essentially a special type of compound. Sentences are built by assigning case to words. Words are then ordered based on what function they have. You can see here that the accusative separates instrumental and comitative words from ergative words, and also locatives from experientials. This word order can be broken for purposes of information structure. So the word order of seikapi, literally I do it towards you, meaning I give it to you, can be changed to katsepi, which means it is that thing which I give to you. Seikakusus, literally I do it towards myself from the house, means I take it out of the house. As you can see, one word can be assigned two cases within the same clause. This can also happen when one word is shared between two clauses, as in Siskayapu. Literally, I experience him do himself away from you, meaning I see him run away from you. As with root order in lexemes, word order in phrases is head initial. Possessors follow their possessums and attributes follow their heads. You can see from these examples that both heads and attributes can be coordinated with word final e. Dak kurriers turk, fluid of the stick of the body, or fluid of the bone, which means marrow. Quat quanatai bamam is infinite death and rebirth. Ta tasayai kasayayai is an animal that eats and is eaten. I want to finish my grammar by describing the etymologies of some important words and by mentioning some important case constructions. The first concept, kwai, is used both as a lexeme and as a case sequence referring to circling motion. It's pretty straightforward. If you imagine movement on a clock and you have 12 o'clock be the starting point, then first you're moving away from 12 o'clock and then in the second half you're moving back to it. That's why it is kwa and then ya. Bamam is pretty straightforward, I think. It's the next in the series of ba, big or more, and bam, extraordinary or most. I use kayas to refer to bones, as was already explained previously. Finally, tsayai is built up from kai, movement inside, and tsas, location. Kai is movement inside because it is further than going towards something. It is going into something. Thus it means location of movement into something. Our first construction, as in tsech ka, I look at it, is an augmented form of sis ka, I see it. It means something like I intentionally see it. Next is sei ka seiyisi, which means I take it to my insides, or I consume it, I eat it. Sei kau means I move it away from itself, I disassemble it. Sei ka tat means I am a person. I always use ka for this construction. Essentially, this construction is me, it is a person. Now we come to the translation text. I will just read it straight. You can pause to look at the gloss or check out the PDF that I'll link in the description. Poich takayasnak bam. Sisisen kenea kiwi burburum. Keneawie kiwi querdurtre burburum. Poich bam kus. Kei kayasnak kursiyiki. Katauka siyi bi kuriersnurk kur. Ke kayasau damau kurketeuke. Sis kayas ka terrier turk ka courier. Kei dak couriers kursiiki. Sis kei bamamau courier. Ta tasayai kasayayai. Kakanas kurders burbur kenesweye kur. Tasayai couriers turk taitau sirs. Sis kas courier burburum courier. Quisius kise ta kayasnakaui. Sius sirs kurburum. Alright, thanks for watching. I'll link the article on writing systems, the PDF for this presentation, and the documentation file in the video description. I'll also link Agma Schwartz's first cursed Conlang Circus from 2022.